So let's make this very clear, that ego is about fear. Now you have to ask yourself, am I partnered with an ego with someone whose main concern is on controlling me and on making sure that I live up to his entitlements, and who is arrogantly inflated most of the time, and who is attached to having things his way or her way, and always has to be right, etc.? Is that my partner, or is my partner the other side, because we have an ego, but we also have, larger than our ego, a spiritual self, which is nothing but unconditional love, wisdom, and healing. So that's what Jung calls the God archetype, or that's what's meant by the kingdom within. So is this my partner? Am I seeing at least half the time the unconditional love, or am I seeing somebody who is holding on for dear life to being above me, right, competing with me, having to have things his way, having to be in control? Is that my partner? Because if it is, then you have grounds for annulment. Because you haven't married the full person. Since the full person would be a combination of the ego, which we're continually attempting to deflate, because the more you deflate the ego, the more room will there be for the self to fill in the rest of one's psyche. This must be why St. John of the Cross said in one of his poems, "Swiftly, with nothing spared, I am being completely demolished," referring to his ego. I want to be completely demolished. I want my ego to go, because that's what gets in the way of my being loved. What irony. The ego is trying to be loved by doing all the things that make him unlovable. He doesn't want to be vulnerable. He wants to be invulnerable. So in true intimacy, there is no hierarchy or taking sides. That's the ego style. Unilateral expectations, in other words, I expect something from you, and you can't expect anything from me. That will give way to mutual agreements. There will be no abuse perpetuated or tolerated. But a major obstacle to this kind of intimacy is the arrogant and actually scared ego. To manage its fear, the ego seeks full control and insists on such undue entitlements as these. And now we could imagine the ego speaking. And he says, "How dare you?" That's a favorite phrase of the ego. How dare you? What gives you the right? Did you think you could do that to me? Accent on me. How dare you not realize that I have to get my way? How dare you not realize that you have to do it my way? That I have to be noticed and appreciated for every good deed I do. That I have to be excused for every misdeed without having to make amends. I can't be shown up to be wrong. I can't be shown up. I can't lose face. And by the way, face there means nothing but ego. And you say, I don't want to lose face. What you mean is I don't want to lose ego. I'm not accountable to you. In other words, I don't owe you anything. I mean, the ego basically says, if I want it, you owe it to me, and you're never giving me enough. I can make demands on you, but you can't make demands on me. I have to win, I have to be loved, I have to be respected, and I have to be given preference by everyone all the time, no matter what. Otherwise, I'll have to get back at you, and I do hold a grudge. Now, you notice the compulsive and aggressive nature of all that I just said. It's as if you were forced to be this way. You know that it doesn't work. You probably don't even like yourself for being like this. You can tell that other people don't like it, but you hold on to it for dear life, especially if you think that it's a part of male macho stuff. Macho is another word for ego. That's the Spanish word for ego. Macho is nothing but ego. Ego means being stuck at the lowest 3 chakras. Okay, you remember the 7 chakras? And the lowest 3, the lowest one is survival. Ego is operating on the basis that I have to fight for my survival. Sex will be used as a weapon with someone who's caught up in ego. And power is the 3rd chakra up. Okay, next one is heart chakra, then throat, where you're open to the free speech to speak the wisdom, the intuition, and then the spiritual transcendence. So as long as I can't accept criticism, can't be wrong, have to get back at you, I also can't love you. Because there is no love in those lower 3 chakras. The love starts with the heart, the next one up. How could you get there when you act like this? That almighty ego is taking up all the love space. Actually, these 3 could be impressed into the service of love. These 3 could become part of how we love. Yet sometimes it doesn't happen, does it? I defend because I'm deathly afraid of being nobody, of losing status, of losing approval. And since true love casts out fear, my scared ego takes up all my energy. I can't see beyond myself long enough to be there for you. So that's why you can't love and also be lording it over someone with your ego. Everybody follow? I think D.H. Lawrence expressed this very well in a short poem of his. Are you willing to be sponged out, erased, canceled, made nothing? If not, you will never really change. So when I'm vulnerable, I'm lovable, and the ego is protecting me from ever showing my vulnerability, and so it's preventing me from being loved. It's like a sentinel that's always on guard against any threat to that big shot behind the wall. But he only succeeds, this sentinel, in walling in his fear and walling out the love that wants to come his way. You see, the ego is calibrated to defend itself because of fear, whereas the heart is calibrated to open itself and be free of fear. And these two, they don't go together. In our class, I went into great detail on this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now in the class called Letting Go and Going On. But for now, I want to say this part, but I want to go on to the work of letting go of the ego, which is our second part of this. Because after a while, you could become awfully bored with the hackneyed, predictable responses of the ego. And of course, there's a peculiarly male ego and a peculiarly female ego. Just as there's an Italian ego, a Greek ego, an Arab ego. Okay, the work of letting go of the ego In a healthy relationship, my ego control is deposed because the ego acts like a king, so he's going to be deposed in favor of equality. Entitlement changes to let me ask for what I want instead of believe that I'm entitled to it, with the understanding even that I might not get it. And if I am indignant about that, it'll show itself as sadness about not being loved as I wanted to be. And when I show you my sadness as opposed to my violent reaction, I become more lovable. So let's see if we can reverse the style of the ego with affirmations like these. I give up having to get my way. I let go of controlling and manipulating others. I ask for appreciation, understanding, and love, and let go of demanding it. I admit when I'm wrong, and I quickly make amends. I invite others to call me on my mistakes. I accept the fact that I do not always win or gain or find fairness. I make no demands. I ask for what I want, and I can take no for an answer. I'm fully responsible for my behavior. I love, respect, and give preference to others. You might even say, I am willing to lose face. And notice that this has a feeling of generosity and sweetness to it, which the other list didn't have. Okay, questions about this? Because I want to talk about the role of the female in helping us males dissolve our ego. Because this is an ancient archetypal reality. Even though we absolutely hate the whole idea, it really does work. Please. You see, you're building your ego when you're in the time of life when you're working on these 3 chakras, this level. But then you just kind of go on doing this, not moving up into your heart chakra. Isn't that a terrible stunting of one's growth and progress? She's pointing out that when your ego is like this, you're highly insecure. And that's very true. You're scared. You're scared of just letting things be the way they are. Just letting it all happen. Because sometimes in life you do lose face. Sometimes in life you do get kicked. Sometimes in life you do lose what you wanted or not get what you wanted and so forth. And a healthy person is able to accommodate that and to work with it, not to have to run away from it or to put up such defenses against it. But there is hope. In the anima, that's the Latin word for soul. And Jung used this word to describe the female dimension of males. Or we could also say that it can refer to females. But I am not referring here to women only. I am also referring to the female dimension of every person. So, I mean the feminine side. Right, yes, I'm sorry. I mean the feminine side of males does this work that I'm now going to describe, as well as actual females. First of all, you'll notice that there are many myths about water and women. Mermaids who lure men into the sea by their beauty, showing their upper part, which is so attractive, and men not realizing that the rest is fish. That there aren't many possibilities for connection, if you know what I mean. In Greek mythology, the sirens, they were female, and they lured men to their death by their beautiful singing, lured sailors to death by their beautiful singing. In German mythology, you have the Lorelei. So there's some association with water, female, and drowning. But the drowning what we're referring to here is the drowning of ego. You see, it was a metaphor. It's not that the sirens were luring men to their death. It's that they were luring men so that the ego would drown, would go into the water where things become disintegrated, dissolved. So there's the dissolving power in the water. This is also the metaphor in baptism. Because in baptism, you are immersed in the water. Your ego, the part of you that's still the son or daughter of Adam, one who's caught at the lower three chakras, that part is drowned. Okay? I baptize thee as I drown your ego, and when I lift you out of the water, you are the new man. You are now one with Christ, the new Adam who lives at the top 4 levels of the chakras. And so I drown to the old and I awake to the new. Those are what the waters of baptism do for me. Even in stories like David and Bathsheba, you see women associated with water because she was taking a bath when he saw her and was attracted to her, and that was the toppling of his ego, his meeting up with her, since she was already married to Uriah. Is that right? So there's this alchemical dissolution that has to happen, and it happens through the female. And often it's the grieving female who does this work for us. The female dissolves us, drowns us, and then puts us back together. So dissolves and then reconstitutes. So now we have myths in which the goddess reconstitutes. That's why on the tomb of Seti I in Egypt, he's the father of Ramses II, there's such a beautiful saying. It's Isis speaking to Seti. It's the goddess. And she says, I will give you the lifespan of the sky. Isn't that beautiful? Here you are in the disintegrated state. You are dead. But in this dead state, your ego has finally bit the dust. In this state, I will give you the lifespan of the sky, which you didn't have in your mortal life. So the feminine is not only maternal and protective, it's also dynamic, and it promotes change, sometimes through destructive forces. That's why Mother Nature changes us sometimes through tidal waves, through earthquakes, through tornadoes. Those are the destructive forces, but she's still our mother. So the work is not only to comfort us and hold us, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, the work is also rough. It's also dissolving, drowning, demolishing, never destroying the ego. It's an initiation process that happens. So it's a transition that everyone is called to. Now, as an example of this, we have the cover of our album on relationships. And by now you are aware of this picture. It's very, very fascinating. This is a plate that you would eat off of. It comes from the 5th century, which is the golden age of Greece. It was found in Athens. It is the marriage of Thetis, who is the female, she's standing behind, and Peleus, he's the male, and these are the parents of Achilles. the great Greek hero. Now Zeus, the father of the gods, fell in love with Thetis, who is a goddess. Part goddess, part human. But the oracle told him, she will produce a son, but the son will be greater than the father. So Zeus, with his gigantic almighty ego, could not handle that. So he gave her instead to a mortal man. That's Peleus. However, in order for this marriage to occur, she has to initiate him into the female mysteries, because just as a man, he's not yet ready for a sacred marriage with a goddess. So he has to go through a kind of baptism, which she does not by water, but with 3 serpents. Because serpents, in ancient times, were associated with women because they shed their skin, and in that sense they were like the moon, which continually sheds and changes, and the female is associated with the moon. So she's shown here with the 3 serpents, symbol of her full feminine power, but also in one hand she also holds the lion, who's the masculine symbol of the sun. So that shows that she's a goddess of wholeness. Now, he is naked from the waist down because he has to be laid bare. He has to be in his most vulnerable position in order to enter into this sacred marriage. So even in baptism, we don't wear our own clothes. We just wear a simple white alb because we've been divested of the clothes that represent our ego. Our ego chooses our clothes. We're divested of that. So he's divested. Also, he has a sword, but she has made sure that the sword remains in the scabbard. In other words, she has blunted the male power. She has put the male power away with these 2 acts. This makes him ready for the initiation. 3 serpents. 1 is biting. Now, biting in the world of dreams means open. So if you're bitten, it means that you're opened. She is having one snake bite him, open him in his 3rd eye. This is so that he will not be stuck in the male logic of ego, and instead will see with full intuition, the feminine style. The 2nd serpent is biting him, that is, opening him just below his ear, so that now, instead of just hearing the human voice, he will hear the music of the spheres. He will hear the harmony of the universe, which is greater than any word of man. And third, the 3rd serpent is biting him in his Achilles tendon, the symbol of the male ego. And ironically, their son will give the name to the Achilles tendon, and that will be his vulnerable spot. The vulnerable part of his body was his Achilles tendon. Okay? So she is opening him in these 3 ways, and once she does this, he assumes his full stature of wholeness. Now he is a man with an anima, with a soul. How did this soul come to him? Through the painful opening and through the blunting of his aggression, that's the sword, and through the defoliation of his sexual parts for the time, just for the time being, so that this wonderful thing can occur. Isn't this fascinating? It's just incredible. All expressed in this one picture. But this is what happens to every one of us, if we're lucky. And of course we fight it tooth and nail. Our ears have to be opened to this music of the spheres, and our arrogant ego has to be open to the humbling truth that we're not in control, and we're not even entitled to be in full control, although we think we are. And men can't initiate themselves. We need the female for that, or at least this female energy. So our only task is to allow it. Okay, I just want to give one little quotation and then we'll end with a poem. I have to acknowledge my orphan condition. I have to acknowledge how bereft I am. Remember in the story of St. Francis, he took off all his clothes and presented himself in the nude in the cathedral, saying, I am putting aside everything that has been given to me, and in this, I'm uncovering myself, and in this state of total divesting, vest in Latin means clothes, I have divested myself of my ego. And it'll look like powerlessness and violation, but it's actually what makes us whole. So this is the quote I wanted to share, and then we'll end with a poem, because this may be true for what we've been saying tonight. You know that Gertrude Stein, the famous American writer, lived in Paris with her lover, Alice B. Toklas, who was famous for her brownies. One night in Paris, after a salon experience of conversation with Gertrude Stein, she used to gather people around her and she would, speak and say interesting things, and they would all kind of have a discussion. One night in Paris, after one of these experiences with Gertrude Stein, Alice B. Toklas remarked, Gertrude Stein has said things tonight it will take her years to understand. So I expect this to happen with me with regard to this picture. Well, I'd like to close with a short poem by William Butler Yeats, the Irish poet, who certainly is talking about unconditional love in this wonderful poem. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly, how love fled, and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. Thank you.